Before we start, please note that the following is only for entertainment and educational purposes and is the exact federal. According to Inner City Press's account on the Sean Diddy Combs trial, Cuba Gooding Jr. took the stand with a deep sigh, his face worn by, as the Oscar winner adjusted the microphone and looked down at his hands. The crowd whispered about the years of scandalous court appearances and damaged headlines, and attempted to reassure them. It was the first time he had ever discussed his relationship with Sean Diddy Combs in public under oath, as well as the night his name was Cuba Gooding Jr., drawn into one of the most dramatic scandals in Hollywood history, sighed deeply. As he entered the stand, his face worn from years of the courtroom mumbled, as the Oscar winner adjusted the microphone, looked down at his hands, and attempted to address the sensational court appearances and ruined headlines. Reassure them that this was his first time discussing his relationship with Sean Diddy Combs, and the evening his name was brought up in public under oath. "I'm not here to protect anyone anymore," he said in a low but calm voice, starting one of the most explosive controversies in entertainment history. "I'm here to tell that the prosecutor took him through his early encounters with Diddy, including informal parties, industry mixers, yacht invites, and truth, even if it stings." Cuba described Sean as charismatic, forceful, and skilled at making you feel like the most important person when they first met him through a common friend in the early 2000s. Significant individual in the room, but when questioned about the notorious yacht party, when Diddy allegedly attempted to serve him up a young, I initially assumed it was simply another party. But something was wrong when a man named Lil Rod Cuba swallowed hard and his eyelids dropped. It felt strange that he continued saying, "I got something special for you." He paused, and I recalled Lil Rod being present, very silently observing everything. Diddy advised him to sit beside me and to calm down. I attempted to strike up a conversation, but he appeared afraid and unwelcome. I never touched him, I swear to God, and he raised his hand and looked at me, but it's not like that. Cuba's voice cracked a little. He set it up so that the courtroom was hushed, and the prosecutor was speaking straight to the jury. Whatever he was doing, I didn't play that game, but he wanted me to. Cuba nodded and then asked, "Did you feel trapped?" His voice was quivering now, and he blinked hard. "Yes, God, you don't say I got up and left early that night because Sean Combs had people's eyes and would remind you without a word. I've made a lot of mistakes, but I sensed something wasn't right." Then the tears started, and Cuba's hand trembled as he sought for a tissue. "I was in the headlines for my actions. Yeah, and I have admitted to those. I have also pleaded guilty, paid settlements, and endured a lot. But this wasn't me." He inhaled deeply and proceeded, and I thought I would go crazy when my name was mentioned, in this circus. "I've worked all my life, and suddenly I'm here because I want people to hear it from me, not a blog or a whisper, and I believe I was a part of that insane number." The prosecutor played a recording from a hearing in which Lil Rod recounted the experience. Cuba looked straight ahead as the comments reverberated around the courtroom. At the conclusion, he cleared his throat, asking if I had ever made someone. "I apologize if I made you feel uncomfortable, but I didn't touch the child or anybody else at the party. And if Sean's team wants to blame me now, then I should have said something sooner, but I chose the wrong man," he replied, looking down and folding the tissue in his fingers. "The walls are collapsing," was frightened. The prosecutor allowed that to remain before continuing. Cuba was then questioned regarding his wider contact with Diddy. Described the gatherings, saying that they began like everything else in the world, and that the responses would only get worse from there. Diddy began tossing out these unique items. "Not even your agent," after the invitations changed from the Hollywood red carpet champagne networking. "Could let you in unless you had the correct name or face." I recall that at his Miami house, everyone had to give up their phones at the door, which wasn't out of the ordinary, but after they distributed robes, which claimed to have a spa motif, you entered it, felt like entering an other reality. He stopped once more and wiped his face, giving the impression that he was doing this to save himself, but in reality, he had already fallen. There was a pause before the prosecutor leaned in. "This is about atonement and stopping what's still happening. Have you ever witnessed someone being, I saw women hurrying out via the back doors and heard shouts and tears as I peered down, but I couldn't see anyone who was physically harmed. However, I was aware that everyone in the courtroom was sitting still seemingly terrified that even loud breathing might lessen the seriousness of what was happening in Cuba. Once applauded for shouting, "Show me the money," Gooding Jr. was now crying. Not for himself, but rather for what he may have helped conceal by being silent. And now that everyone was paying attention, he leaned forward gradually and used a fresh tissue to dab at his eyes. I used to believe that some of the women who never returned to such events simply didn't enjoy themselves or that it was too crazy. But now I know they. The prosecution went back to him, this time in a different tone, and likely threatened to quiet him. "Why speak now, Mr. Gooding? Why is he here?" Cuba was hesitant because I have a son, and I am aware of what happens when you remain silent. Silence doesn't keep anyone safe. It just makes the situation worse. He explained how, in the years following his own controversies, people began to shun him, calls dried up, projects disappeared, and some friends moved on. Sean called and invited me even though the radio was muted, which made me question why he looked up at the jury when he knew I had been pulled through. A new exhibit was unveiled, featuring a picture from a 2013 vacation to the Bahamas, Cuba. Sitting next to the mud because he believed I would protect him now, as if I owed him. "I didn't know they were that young," Diddy added, pointing to a group of attendees who were barely dressed and had fuzzy features. No one asked no one. "That picture haunts me," he said, fiercely closing his eyes to contain additional tears. Checked, we just smiled for the camera. Since I appear to be having a great time and all I can think of right now is how many people were suffering around me when the judge called for during a 10-minute break, Cuba remained in his chair, massaging his face and whispering something that could only be heard over the courtroom microphones. "Please pardon me as the jury." No one applauded or whispered. Instead, they simply watched the broken man on the witness stand, torn between his past and present. The tension remained like smoke. After recess, Cuba returned to the witness stand with a new sense of tension in the air, his suit being a little tight, and an opportunity to finally confess the truth. His eyes were bloodshot and wrinkled, and he leaned into the microphone as if he had been suppressing this for years. "There's something I've never spoken publicly," he added in a low, trembling voice. "Something happened at Diddy's place in LA one night that I couldn't unsee. He erased. It was one of those events where nothing felt real and everyone had to sign non-disclosure agreements before entering, and his eyes were watering before the tears even started. Wore masks not for fun but to conceal their identities. I recall hearing a female scream as I entered the upstairs hallway, and the courtroom stopped. I had no idea why. What should I do? I froze, thinking it might be a party trick, but as I turned the corner, I noticed a security guy quickly slamming a door shut, as if he hadn't want anyone to see inside. Cuba's voice broke when I asked him what was happening. He simply gave me a glance and said, "Mr. Gooding, this room is off limits." He looked straight ahead as though he were back in that corridor. I left without saying anything to anyone, and that's what still bothers me. I could have halted something and asked questions, but I chose not to. The prosecutor kept silent, allowing the situation to unfold. When the lawsuits began to surface, I saw some of those same girls, different names, same eyes, same fear, and I could have raised my voice at that time. But I reasoned that if I spoke, they would claim that I was doing it to save face because I was already knee-deep in my own mess, and who would believe me? Cuba inhaled deeply and let the silence to bear the weight of his remarks, but I wasn't the only one who remained silent. Dozens of others were there at those parties. Actresses, producers, sportsmen, influencers, and well-known people saw the same things, possibly worse, but like me, they remained silent. That's the people believe that Hollywood is a dream, but sometimes it's just a well-executed nightmare. He sat back and stared at the ceiling, feeling ill and ashamed. As if preparing for impact, Cuba straightened his posture and gripped the wide arms of his chair. When the FBI raided Diddy's home, he remarked, "I wasn't surprised, I'm relieved." He turned to face the gallery, where on that particular day, reporters scrawled notes and onlookers leaned forward. I thought that if they took him down, maybe people would stop, labeling me insane for what I had witnessed the prosecutor do. I knew that hell was coming. Cuban nodded when asked if he had ever seen any surveillance footage or recordings at any of these events. Diddy had cameras all over the place, some of them outside. When I once questioned him about it, he joked, "I like to keep memories." He took a deep breath, but they weren't. Diddy would get individuals to return their phones when they left them behind, but only after they were reminded that they were weapons. After one of those events, a producer I won't name was allegedly threatened to go public, and the next thing we knew about his dealings, he was banned for years. Disappeared overnight, the prosecution said. Did he ever make a clear threat against you? Cuba blinks, then nods slowly without saying anything, although he once abruptly drew me aside at a brunch and said, "We're both survivors, man. We've both people like us have to stick together because we've seen too much." His sour chuckle sounded like encouragement, yet it felt like a warning. Cuba then leaned forward with obvious emotion. I knew I would be dragged through the dirt again when my name was called in this instance. He held up his hand as tears started to fall down his face, saying, "I know they'd say I was just avoiding my past, but I'm not avoiding it. I'm owning it. I made a mistake. I injured people. I touched someone without their consent. I entered a guilty plea. I completed the job. I paid fines, and I still bear that guilt. But what I'm talking about now transcends me. It's a system, a disease, a machine that survives on dread and quiet." Changed as the prosecutor showed a number of pictures from the galla's red carpets, when Cuba was seen next to Diddy, grinning and joking. "Do you recall this?" Cuba nodded when the prosecutor pointed to a 2014 photo, indicating that it was the BET after party in Atlanta. The one with the "what transpired that night at the underground club" was that a female dancing on a table appeared, to be barely legal, if at all, and Diddy clapped his, "I never saw her leave the gallery after security placed her in a side room," after pointing to her with their hands. One juror covered her mouth and asked, "Did you report it?" "No," muttered Cuba. "I didn't. I assured myself that she would be all right since it wasn't my place. Anything obvious enough to express, but I knew in my heart." He surveyed the courtroom. When you look at this industry from the outside, you assume everyone is living the good life. But once you get inside, you notice that the true currency is secrets rather than money. He paused for a long time, breathing through his nose. Diddy had secrets about everyone, and if he had anything on, everybody knew it. If he didn't, you remained silent in case the prosecutor came up with one last question for this portion. "What do you want the world to remember your testimony today?" Cuba stated softly while staring straight into the camera that was broadcasting this moment worldwide. "The fact is that your past transgressions do not bar you from defending others, and that if you remain silent over an extended period of time, you join." He brushed away another tear, and I was scared that I was being selfish. But I'm not that man anymore, and if stating the truth about the situation, I won't be a part of it anymore. The court called for another break, but this time Cuba stood, so perhaps it's not too late if the truth now spares even one person from what I witnessed. After the break, Cuba Gooding Jr. emerged from the break on more stable legs. His shoulders were heavier, but his voice was more determined, and he didn't wait for a question. He stated, clutching the sides of the witness stand, "I have to speak on this next part this time because I saw things that night that I can't keep from seeing." The prosecutor motioned for Cuba to continue, and he took a deep breath before diving back into the chronology of his interactions with Diddy, behaving as though I hadn't. Specifically, a weekend getaway in the Hollywood Hills was intended to be a birthday celebration. Flew a group of us without phones, press, or any other customs. Yet something changed that weekend. There was a strange vibe that, as if everyone was anticipating the big moment, he wiped his mouth and then his brow. And I continued asking what we were truly there, but everyone continued to ignore it. Then, around midnight, the house staff began distributing masks, actually, black and gold ones, to the residents. I thought, well, maybe it's just theatrics, when they told us it was a themed party. However, when I entered the rear wing there were people lining up like animals, some of them hardly clad, and Sean Diddy was in the house when his voice broke again. I turned to go since I didn't want to be involved in that, but I looked too long and ended up appearing like a king supervising a rite in the middle of it all. Cuba claimed that one of Did's security guards cornered him close to the corridor and stated, "Gooding, you didn't see anything. You want to continue operating under that rule, correct?" I nodded. I wasn't brave enough to do anything else. So, Cuba looked down as the court fell silent, astonished. I've been silent for too long, and I know some people will say something like, I'm just doing this now to sell a movie or clean up my image. However, I don't give a damn if my testimony prevents even one person from being harmed in that way. Then every headline, insult, and outrage were worthwhile. Then he revealed something that made the courtroom freeze, and I saw people. They all looked the same on that night, and they are now publicly separating themselves from Sean celebrities, CEOs and individuals with families and businesses. Other way, and now they're claiming they didn't know anything, which is the lie that hurts the most, he added, still calm but clearly shaken. The reason I'm going to stop making excuses because I was complicit in that house's transformation into a graveyard of innocence, and I did nothing about it. He swallowed his shame and stopped, saying, At another party in Las Vegas, I witnessed a young woman being taken down I didn't recognize her. I didn't even know her name, but I could see her eyes attempting to communicate with me, so I ignored her and simply went away. Cuba leaned. The truth is that there were dozens of those girls over the years, and we didn't ask any questions, so going into the mic keeps me up every night. Diddy Built asked if he had ever told anyone about Cuba, and I nodded. I tried once, but I was too terrified and self-centered. When a legal buddy of mine told him about the masks, parties, and silences back in 2016, he warned me to stop since the NDAs would depict me in a negative light, as unstable due to my personal charges, so I remained silent once again. His voice became more firm, but Cassie and Lil Rod then spoke up, and I understood I wasn't alone. Having nightmares and realizing that I wasn't alone in feeling guilty gave me the confidence to approach the prosecution and say, put me on the stand and I'll talk. Because perhaps that girl's story wouldn't be a warning now if someone had done it for her in Vegas. I'm seeking justice for the people who were harmed for names we'll never know, not redemption. That's between me and God. I wiped his eyes once more. He turned to face the defense table where Diddy was sitting, stone-faced, and said, I hope you hear this, Sean, for those who had never left those houses. We remember now, and the truth is louder than your money. So I hope you remember every name, every shout, and every celebration you turned into a prison. The prosecution asked Cuba one last time, what do you want the world to take away from your testimony? As his dying remarks reverberated across the room, simply put, I want others to know that speaking up doesn't need perfection. All you need to do is be honest. I broke the chain of silence. He went on, Hollywood has this sickness, this addiction, to power, and Sean was the dealer. He made people feel like gods. It's time to stop the falsehoods, and they showed him loyalty in return. I know this because I was one of them, and it cost me my reputation, my profession, and possibly even my soul. I lost years trying to mend what I'd broken in myself, and I'll never fully get back what I lost, he said, adjusting his seat. However, I can be a witness and a voice. And then all of a sudden his serenity collapsed once again, causing him to cry out of relief rather than guilt. I couldn't bear it any longer. I can't continue to act as though I didn't see what I did. He stood without being asked and spoke to the audience as if to make a public apology to the women in the prosecutor remarked, I'm sorry, people who thought I was better than the ones I didn't save. The courtroom was filled with astonished silence. I am grateful, Mr. Gooding. And lay the case. No more conjecture, no more spin. The truth, unadulterated, human, and lengthy past due.